Bill Clinton's election as president in 1992 sets off this whole chain of events in Arkansas that ultimately results in the rise of the first true political star for the Arkansas Republican Party in the form of Mike Huckabee.
Mike Huckabee is a fascinating figure, another man from Hope, another good Southern Baptist, another good speaker, another guy with an engaging personality. He came at a good time. He had a pretty good message. He used media well. He depicted himself as an outsider when he came. He was the only Republican state office holder, and he got a lot of sympathy for that. He presented sort of a clean house kind of approach to government, and people liked him a lot. He's funny, he's quick with a quip, and so in a way he was well situated.
In late 1992, Bill Clinton resigns from the governorship just before he becomes U.S. president, and Jim Guy Tucker is the lieutenant governor who becomes governor. That leaves a void in the lieutenant governorship, and what happened in early 1993 suddenly made the lieutenant governorship appear more relevant, because while Jim Guy Tucker was in Washington at the inauguration along with the Speaker of the House, that left the President Pro Tem of the State Senate, the acting governor of the state of Arkansas. And that President Pro Tem, while he was acting governor, actually did something in the form of commuting a number of sentences of prisoners, and really kind of makes people think, well, maybe we do need to have this special election for lieutenant governor sooner rather than later. The Democrats selected as their nominee in their primary someone who a lot of folks in the party thought was really going to be the next generation of kind of a great Arkansas progressive Democratic leader, a lawyer from Little Rock named Nate Coulter. The Republicans selected as their nominee, without competition, Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee had been the former president of the Arkansas State Southern Baptist Convention. And in 1992, he had run a campaign for the U.S. Senate against Dale Bumpers. It had been a hard-edged campaign, and Dale Bumpers had pretty successfully fended off his attacks. But Mike Huckabee, despite the flaws of that campaign, was somebody who had great personal style and real charisma, especially in terms of using television and radio successfully.
His political rhetoric was very much spiced with that sort of Baptist minister flair, which has resonance for Arkansans and for Southerners generally. That sort of rhythm to his speech that the sort of Southern Baptist or the Protestant denominations of the South tend to have. It's recognizable, it's reassuring. You think you know what you're getting when you hear that.
Mike Huckabee, coming off that November loss, really never stopped running. He never ended that candidacy of '92 and kind of let it naturally lead into this 1993 campaign. And so it comes down to an election that is ultimately decided by just a few thousand votes. Mike Huckabee wins with 50.08% of the vote. I mean, a very close election. But it sets the stage for him to ultimately become governor of the state and ultimately succeed both as a politician and as a governor. Mike Huckabee becomes lieutenant governor, is elected to a full term as lieutenant governor in 1994. There really appears that there's not going to be much opportunity for service in state politics in Arkansas, because it appeared that Jim Guy Tucker would finish his governorship, and indeed there seemed to be a lot of folks angling for the governorship in Arkansas. And so Mike Huckabee instead sees another opportunity, and that is the possibility of being a U.S. Senator. Because in 1996, David Pryor, the very popular Democratic U.S. Senator, had decided to retire, leaving an opening there. And he begins in the spring of 1996 running for the U.S. Senate, and I think in the eyes of most, might well have won that U.S. Senate position if he had stayed in the race until the end. Mike Huckabee leaves that race for the U.S. Senate because of the actions of a federal jury considering the case of his sitting governor in Little Rock. And these were a series of charges against Jim Guy Tucker and others that emanated out of the Whitewater investigation. The federal jury was considering a number of charges against Jim Guy Tucker. Ultimately, in May of 1996, that federal jury did convict Jim Guy Tucker of a number of those charges. Immediately, Jim Guy Tucker holds a press conference in which he says that he will leave the governorship as a result of being convicted of those charges so that he can better fight his conviction in the courts. And instead of continuing that race for the U.S. Senate, Mike Huckabee decides that what's best is for him to instead prepare to become governor. And so he begins the transition to the governorship on the date that had been laid out by Jim Guy Tucker for his departure. But just before Mike Huckabee and his family began to walk down to the House chamber for that swearing in, a note arrived from Governor Tucker. He had changed his mind, that instead he was not going to resign the governorship, but instead that he was going to temporarily step down while he prepared his appeal.
It was a bad idea on Jim Guy Tucker's part at that point. He had built the expectations so much that he almost had a contract with the state to do it. Now, legally, I don't think he had to leave office simply because he'd been convicted. But he'd said he was going to. It was an exciting day at the state capitol. Mike Huckabee was ready to be inaugurated as governor. Jim Guy Tucker wasn't leaving. Mike Huckabee's people were angry. Tucker was in private meetings with his friends trying to persuade him to go ahead and resign as he'd planned to do. There was talk of impeachment. We had a mess for 4 or 5 hours, but finally friends prevailed on Tucker to go ahead and resign. He did, and the crisis passed, and Mike Huckabee became governor. But did it on camera, under control, in a very cool and calm way, and won high marks that stood him in good stead for many years to come.
Mike Huckabee, through that day, showed real grace as he dealt with those events.
This is not a happy day. It's a sad day. On the other hand, there's a time for us to exercise our mercy, and I think we have done that. But there's also a time for exercise our justice, and now we must do that.
His behavior that day really was important in establishing a true honeymoon for his governorship. Because ultimately, about 6 p.m. that night, Mike Huckabee was allowed to be sworn in and allowed to give his inaugural address as governor.
The duties of the office of governor
of the state of Arkansas,
upon
which I am now about to enter.
which I'm about now to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.